So let's go ahead then and get into our first topic, Eric.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about DLSS and Switch 2. So, Super Metal Dave, it looks like you may have made a video on this. So, what is
Multiple
DLSS?
videos.
Multiple videos. Cool. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is DLSS? Is it magic? I don't know. Can you please explain it to us, everyday folk, as what DLSS is?
Yeah, it is magic, literally. No, but yeah, it's basically it's AI upscaling used in it's hardware based AI upscaling, and what that is that the Switch 2 is confirmed now. We've seen the chip. It has an NVIDIA based SoC, and from the leaks that we know, the confirmed leaks, that the chip is based on NVIDIA's Ampere architecture, which is the 3000 series, which came out in 2020. And if you do any research on DLSS and RTX GPUs, that really started taking effect with the Turing GPUs that came out in 2018, which is the RTX 2060, 2080 Ti, so on and so forth. And so ever since then, DLSS and ray tracing has been a feature of NVIDIA GPUs. So since the Switch 2 is pretty much confirmed to have Ampere architecture, which is the 3000 series, we know it's going to have DLSS support and functionality and ray tracing functionality. So, and the AI upscaling comes from these things called tensor cores, which is part of the architecture itself built into Ampere. So if you that's some common misunderstanding about DLSS and ray tracing and things like that. People don't understand how it works because they think it's a feature that is software based and they just have to add it in somehow, but it's actually on an architecture level for the chip itself. It's actually made that way to have the cores that produce these features inside the chip. So Ampere has tensor cores, RT cores, ray tracing cores, and the actual CUDA cores all built into one into the chip itself. So you can't take it out. It's actually built into the architecture. So the tensor cores produce the AI upscaling, which is basically it's like telling your computer to figure out how to display an image on the screen to make it look correct. You've seen these AI images online where people try to mimic real life people or real life images, and the computer will do its best job to make it look similar enough or close enough to approximate what they look like. So the same thing with DLSS is that it's actually taking a lower resolution image and upscaling it with AI, smart artificial intelligence, to make it look close or close enough to the actual image that it's trying to upscale to, which would be 4K or 1440p. So you would take a 720p image, for example, and then you would upscale it to 1440p, which is, by the way, I think is going to be the resolution that Switch is going to be the sweet spot. It's going to have a lot of 720p, 900p upscaling to 1440p range. I think that's realistic. I don't really think 4K is going to be that often, but they obviously will have games that do that as well. But for the more ports and stuff like that, I think 1440p is going to be the range. But so it takes the lower resolution image and it approximates it to make it look close to the native resolution. That's the goal of AI upscaling, and that's the failure of software upscaling. And when I say failure is because if you look at the comparisons between FSR, AMD's version, it pales in comparison. The reason why it looks so bad is because it's not actually using any hardware-based AI to upscale the image. It's using all software. So that's why DLSS has such an awesome, amazing advantage for Switch 2, because it's going to actually make those lower res images look great on your 4K TV, even from those, even as low as 540p, it will look pretty much good enough for most people on a 4K display upscale to 1440p. It's going to look maybe a little bit more shimmery, there's some image breakup a little bit here and there, but a lot of people are not going to notice that kind of stuff. And it's actually a game changer, especially with NVIDIA's latest update they had with the transformer model, changing the way DLSS is actually rendering. They can use the original model still, of course, and it's going to look great, but the new model actually makes things look even better from lower resolutions. So a lot of people can compare it to performance mode and quality mode for the transformer model. If you guys know anything about the performance models for DLSS, you have performance mode, balance mode, and quality mode, and you have ultra performance mode, which is like super low resolution, upscaling really high. The problem with DLSS, the older model, is that the lower resolution you go, obviously, the more degraded the image looks at 4K or 1440p. And the transformer model, the new one they just released, which Switch 2 will be compatible with because it is compatible with Ampere-based architecture, you will be able to have better quality at lower resolutions, which is a gigantic, huge win for Nintendo and something like the Switch 2, which is going to be outputting a lot of games at lower resolutions because it has to get things to run well on the console. So the cool thing is that basically it's gonna get rid of a lot of the shimmering, a lot of the artifacts on the screen. And in the video I posted just last week, I showed an example of how much better the new model looks, and that will actually be compatible with Switch 2. There is a slight performance hit when developers use that. So you'll get like maybe 5 to 10 frames per second less performance using that model, but the advantage outweighs the disadvantages, I would say, because you are actually able to keep rendering lower resolutions and making it look really close to how it looks on the quality mode, which is close to native resolution. And people are not going to be able to tell a difference. And literally, it's like magic. It really is. Like it takes a lot for me to be impressed by something these days, and I was blown away by it. On my own PC, I did tests, and I was completely blown away. I've been playing Cyberpunk 2077 full on path tracing, max settings at 4K with performance mode DLSS, which is only 1080p, and it looks like native 4K. It looks that good. So like they did an amazing job. If you use the old model, which is the CNN model, it looks worse. You can see the difference. There's more shimmering, there's more artifacts, there's more jaggies. But on the new model, it looks like almost like native 4K. So like I was blown away by it. So DLSS is a huge win for Nintendo, and there is nothing that PlayStation 5 has or Xbox has that is as good as that. So
I've got a question. So when it comes to DLSS, and like implementing it into games that are going to come for Switch 2, is this something that requires a lot of efforts from developers to kind of implement into their software that they're developing, or is it something that they'll just be able to turn on for it and it's going to automatically do the job, since it's an AI upscaler?
Yeah, that's something that Nintendo will have to answer the question on. Sure. And I'm sorry about my camera, guys. I'm gonna have some choppiness. I don't know. I can't really do anything about it right now, but yeah, you can hear me okay, hopefully.
Yeah, you're great, man. You're good.
So basically, yeah, Nintendo's probably going to have a blanket like option for developers in their dev kits to have like blanket DLSS. So it's something that they'll be able to turn on in the actual dev kit is my guess. Mm-hmm. That'll be the smartest way to do it. Also, they can likely have the more like high level developers will probably do like their own version of it. They'll probably use DLSS 4 or whatever. It's really not that hard to implement these days. I can put DLSS 4 into my own games just by dragging and dropping the DLL file into the game. And it works.
So it's not like it doesn't take a ton of resources to. That's what I was kind of curious about. I'm a lifelong Nintendo fan since the day I picked up a controller. I understand the company. I'm good at kind of navigating and predicting where they're going. Tech is my big blind spot. So I was always curious with the DLSS, like, is this something that devs are going to be like, we don't want to waste the resources trying to implement in the games because it takes too much time, it's too expensive, or if it's going to be more of an easy inclusion that devs for the most part are going to be like, yeah, let's have the upscaling in there.
Yeah, that'd be the whole reason to really to have the Switch 2 be on NVIDIA is to use that. So I think it's going to have, because like this is a portable console, you're going to be using as a portable on the go and on your TV. Upscaling is like probably one of the highest top priorities for Nintendo to make this look good at all times. So you got to think that they're going to be having that easily available for developers to use. And back in the day, mind you, it was actually harder for developers. There's documentation that proves this. It was actually harder for developers to implement DLSS back when it was brand new. But now that the technology has matured and everyone's using it, it's available for everyone to use now at this point. It's actually pretty much just as easy to implement as anything else, like turning on a switch, basically.
Right.
No pun intended. But yeah, like it's a huge, awesome game changer, really. Like I was excited for FSR back when it first came out with AMD's chips, because they were trying to do it without using hardware, and I was like, wow, if they can do it without using any hardware, that would make the cost of their GPUs less, and it would be more beneficial for people to use because it wouldn't cost so much. But once you go DLSS, you can't go back. Well, like once you see how good it looks, there's just no denying how much better it is in FSR. And sadly, AMD's own version of it currently with FSR 3, they haven't released their newer GPU yet, but it doesn't matter at this point. It's just nowhere near as good. There's it just looks bad, especially on the big screen. It looks really bad. So Nintendo is in a great position to win big time with their image quality and make things look like a next gen console when you're playing your TV. That's what it's going to do. And the magic of it is that you're actually playing something that's going to be like rendering at 720p internally most of the time, and you're not going to even notice. That's the magic of it.
Right. I mean, that's really cool. That's magic.
It is magic.
Yeah.
It's literally the secret sauce that they have. So yeah, it's going to be really good. I'm really excited. And I'm really excited to see certain ports on Switch 2, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I have a suspicion that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is actually going to have better image quality on Switch 2 than it does on PS5. Because if you look at if you research what they're using on the PS5 version of that game, they're not even using FSR, guys. They're using like TAU or something like that. Some kind of like really low quality upscaler, and it looks terrible on PS5. It's a blurry mess.
Yeah.
And the PC port of Rebirth uses DLSS, and it looks fantastic. Even on like a 2060 GPU from 2018, it looks better than PS5.
Wow.
So hey, man, I'm excited for Switch 2. I'm excited for the tech. I'm going to be doing lots of comparisons on my channel. Like I have a beast PC, as you guys know if you follow me. I'm waiting to get the RTX 5090. I have a 4090 still, but you can't buy one right now, so I'm waiting on that. But once I get I already have a great PC, but I'm going to do lots of comparisons with Switch 2 ports and the PC port. I'm not going to even worry about consoles. I like to do the PC comparisons versus the Nintendo stuff, because you get the greatest differences, and then it's actually more impressive that way when you do that. If you compare, like I remember with Switch 1, people were comparing it to Xbox One. It's like, oh, it doesn't look that bad, compared to Xbox One. Well, of course it doesn't. But like it's more impressive when you compare these things to like really the higher spec stuff. Like when you compare like Doom Eternal to the PC version, like, wow, that's really impressive. So
yeah, it's the biggest difference that you're comparing it to. That's cool.
Right.
Stash, I think you wanted to chime in with something.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, as far as like frame rate goes, what it could do to improve frame rate. Like if you have a game that's say running at 50 frames a second, would DLSS be able to improve it?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, because DLSS is all about your image quality, but yes, because you're going to be trying to render something at a lower resolution to get there. So like, if a developer's having a problem with getting their game running at 60 frames and they're running it at 50 frames and the game's running at like 900p, they're like, we need to use DLSS to lower to 720p and we'll get 60 frames, no problem. Then yes.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So yes, it will increase performance in that sense, but like it's more about the image quality itself, and because it's tricking your eyes with AI, it's not really tricking your eyes. It's actually approximating the correct output resolution with AI to do that. It makes it appear to be a high resolution, even though it's not. It's rendering it that way. They're able to increase frame rate because it increases performance, because the actual performance of the console does less with the actual rendering resolution of real pixels. It's using AI generated pixels to get that high resolution, so you can get better performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Hopefully that makes sense for everyone in chat. I understood that well. And, that's just an example, though, of how like developers are able to get creative if they want to be able to hit, a 60 FPS, or if they want to improve the frame rate. Like there's options for them with DLSS. So this is like, it's really cool. It's quite the utility, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's a game changer. Like it's I'm not making that up. It's 100% the real deal, guys. Like seriously, you should
Now,
be excited for that.
Again, because like I said earlier, I'm completely ignorant when it comes to the tech stuff. It's just not my area. With DLSS embedded into kind of the DNA of Switch 2,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that Switch 2 is backwards compatible, would it be possible to incorporate that DLSS in Switch 1 games when you're playing them on your Switch 2? Or would that need to be something that developers kind of add in as, kind of like how Sony did, where you could buy the $5 or $10 PS5 upgrade for the games?
Probably either and or is my guess. I would say Nintendo
Yeah.
would have an option to automatically boost your games with blanket upscaling on backwards compatibility, which would automatically make Switch games look and run better. Without any patches at all. Not saying it's going to make them run perfectly that way, but that could be an easy fix for certain games to look a lot better and run like maybe a game is like natively running at 30 frames and like can't even hit 720p. With Nintendo's like blanket option, they could easily nail that and then make it look better on your TV as well for that. And then actual patching it, developers need to go in and say, hey, we need to actually patch into the code a 60 frames per second mode, because we actually do that in the first place. We can actually patch it in now, add some better textures, and maybe charge $5 to $10 for people to upgrade to the Switch 2 like variant of it, and you can get a game running and looking a lot better. Or they could do like PlayStation does and just release the entire native version of that said game to Switch 2. So say they want to give the PS5 or PS4 version of Doom Eternal, they would have to release its own version on Switch 2 probably, or a native port upgrade. And they would either charge you or they would give it to you for free. It's up to the developer at that point.
Ah, man, it'd be so rad. Just the slew of games on Switch 1 that I just picture with the DLSS. Even the Prime 1 remaster, throw some upscaling on that. Already a stunning game on the Switch. Just imagine some of the new particle effects and lighting effects that you could get in a game like that. Really cool.
Yeah, sky's the limit.
I've asked 100 questions.
Yeah, I got one again. So I want to pick your brain on this, see if you think it's possible, because it's something I've mentioned a few times, and it's just something I would really love. I'm sure you guys would too. Is there, what do you think the chances are, or like how hard would it be, let's say that, to use the DLSS on NSO games?
They could do that, but I don't see why they would, because you're usually playing like a retro game, right?
Well, like, say we're playing Wave Race 64.
Mm-hmm.
Could we make it look better? Could we make it run better? With a patch?
Yeah, you could. I just haven't heard of anybody doing something like that with DLSS before, because usually it's for like, that's like, they're like emulating something.
Mm-hmm.
If I were in Nintendo, what they would actually do would just update their emulator and just run it at a better resolution, better frame rate. You could do that within the emulator. You don't need DLSS for that. But yes, technically DLSS could give you better resolution output for doing that. So yes, you could. I just had never heard of anybody using DLSS for emulators before. So that's kind of an interesting question. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah, it would be cool. It would be cool for sure. Anything to make, to shine up those 64 games.
64 games need a lot more work than just DLSS. Let's be honest.
I know. I have the analog 3D pre-ordered, and we'll see. We'll see what it does. Right? Who
Yeah,
knows?
there's the N64 games have issues with all kinds of stuff besides like resolution. They got texture, they have texture issues, all kinds of like collision detection issues, like all kinds of stuff. That's what makes it an N64 game though. That's retro.
Yeah.
So
It's
Mhm.
true.
I don't know.
Man. Demonic Brawler had a funny super chat here. Says still won't fix Scarlet and Violet. Funny thing is, it could help with the frame rate potentially.
They would need a patch for that game to
Yeah.
get rid of those N64 trees.
Well, yeah, you're not going to fix that part, but the frame rate, it could theoretically. I don't think they're going to touch the game though. I'm just being completely honest. I'm pretty sure that the Pokemon Company has well moved on to the next.
Yeah, you know what really annoyed me about certain Switch 2, Switch 1 first party games is that they were having stuttering issues on some of these games. Like not all of them, and a lot of that had to do with the memory of the console. So I think Switch 2 is going to be a massive upgrade, not just for resolution and clarity, but also just smoothness of gameplay. You're not going to have so many stuttering issues that you have with Switch 1. Long load times are going to be over. It's going to be a much faster loading console. So yeah, it's just going to be such a huge upgrade. And if the league specs are correct, you're looking at around what is it, like 6-7 times more powerful while docked or something like that? What it averages out to?
That's wild. Just thinking about that is so wild to me.
I know.
I can't remember. I had a chart for it. I mean, it's obviously leak specs. So we're not 100% sure, but it's pretty significant. Like even even like handheld is significantly more powerful than current docked Switch, which is just that's awesome. Like that's just great news. Now again, a lot of that's just measuring the GPU stuff because the CPU stuff is still kind of like, hey, we don't know. Like we know the cores. There's 8 of them.
Yeah. The
We're-
CPU, like the CPU, that you haven't heard any rumors of anybody complaining about the CPU.
Yeah, no,
You've
no,
heard
definitely.
you just heard basically like it gets the job done pretty much, right? So like it's not. I wouldn't be too worried about the CPU. Everything I've heard myself, I haven't heard anybody saying anything wrong about the CPU either.
Every developer I talk to, they're just excited. They just want to get their stuff out on it.
Yeah. So but people need to keep their expectations in check though. The only thing I would not expect is a lot of 4K games. But you will get 4K upscaling for certain games, maybe 30 frames per second. But I would not expect 4K 60 on Switch 2. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think it's going to be going to be dependent. Like, let's say because there was this great thing, this great super chat that just came in about this, asking about like the 120 FPS stuff, which I don't think Switch 2 is supporting. It'd be cool if it did, but
I mean, it can support it, but will it do it? That's the question.
Yeah, I don't think that's even going to be something they target. Now, whether they allow third parties to maybe target it on docked mode, especially because doesn't make as much sense in handheld if the screen's limited. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
But what I do think is interesting is when you look at the upscaling, and I have a 4080 Super. I know that's like way overkill compared to what the Switch is doing in there.
Oh yeah.
But I kept thinking that obviously we don't know what sort of customization could have happened with the DLSS specifically for this platform, because it's probably using a custom version, just like technically like PlayStation 5 Pro isn't using just straight FSR. It's using a custom version for their hardware. So I'm assuming that they'll probably be, and we've seen some patents, that there's probably a fully custom version of DLSS to maximize this specific set of hardware to do upscaling. So when we talk about like 4K 60, I'm not thinking in terms of like taking Call of Duty and throwing that at 4K 60. I don't think that that's realistic. And Call of Duty wants to stay at 60 on console. It doesn't want to go to 30. So that's something that if they did use upscaling, maybe it's just a 1440p and they just kind of go in between. But I was thinking about the 4K 60 stuff, because if you have a game, let's say an example, it's Mario Kart, right? And it can run at higher than 60 FPS already. It caps it because That's just what Nintendo does. It would cap everything at 60, but there's plenty of headroom for it to run more. I think if you used DLSS to bump that to 4K, there's no reason it shouldn't be able to maintain that 60.
Right.
Because the DLSS is technically like using dedicated parts of the GPU, and it'll mostly be in docked mode. By the way, we're talking about this. This isn't handheld. That's this stuff might not even be activated in handheld mode. So that's a mystery too. If they allow it to be activated in handheld mode, that's awesome. It's going to affect your battery life, but if they want to give the consumers a way to say, hey, we don't care, let us get an hour of battery life but better performance in handheld, cool. I mean, I'm all for options. So we'll see if Nintendo allows that, because we know on Switch over time they unlock new power profiles for developers and stuff, and maybe that's one thing down the line. They're like, hey, look, if you want to use DLSS and handheld, developers, go for it, and just let the fans choose if they want to turn it on and off for battery life reasons.
Don't get me wrong. There will be 4K 60 games on Switch. It just won't be
It's not
AAA third party games.
Yeah, I don't see any AAA third party game doing it unless it's. I could see if a game I'm thinking about is something like maybe like Fortnite, which I know is that AAA's, and I don't know. It's one of the biggest games in the fucking world by Epic Games.
They
can offer a mode where they'd be like, hey, if you want to go to 4K at 60, you can, but like we might bump down some of the visual effects, but then hey, you can also get all the visual effects, but then we don't want you to dip back to 30 FPS. You want to go back to 30 like Switch? Do you really like that? Maybe they let you do that. I would say nobody, if you could play Fortnite at 60 on Switch 2, if they give you an option to play at 30 to look prettier, don't do it. I don't know what you're doing.
It always depends on the game. If you remember the Digital Foundry review of the Prince of Persia game, that 2D game, it was running at 4K 60 on Xbox Series S. Because it's a lower spec game, so it was like 720p or whatever on Switch 1. But like, you're gonna get 4K 60 games on Switch. It depends on the type of game it is.
Yeah, the more graphically intensive games, guys, are kind of the ones that you're going to see. No, those probably aren't going to 4K. They might even be upscaling to hit 1080p on your TV because they want to hit certain performance metrics, which is perfectly fine in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases, that's going to be fine. Even like 1080p on a 4K TV. Guys, we've been doing it the whole Switch generation. It's not terrible. Obviously, we want better. But, I also think that this generation is going to be the one where we're going to see, kind of like we saw on PlayStation and Xbox now, options for consumers to choose better looking visuals versus like higher frame rates or higher resolution. Like we might get options as consumers to do that. PC gamers have all the options. Right. But Nintendo likes to keep things simplified. So I can see like a performance versus quality mode kind of starting to be a thing this gen for Nintendo. And DLSS will probably play a big role in that.
Right. Yeah, I'm really excited to get the Switch 2 port of Cyberpunk. I want to see that, do my own comparison video of that. That's going to be really exciting for me. I love that game, so I'm always messing with that game settings and everything. It's really fun.
See, I'm one of those things that I'm thinking like, God, what games are like almost always at 30 that I guess I'd be okay if it was at 30 and it stayed there. I'm like, oh, what if the next 3D Zelda, they give me a quality mode in 4K, but it's 30. I might rock that. I might rock that on my TV and then just put it in 60 on the go.
As 10K Noodle says, Ocarina of Time was a smooth 20 frames per second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, the entire Switch generation, we've been dealing with some issues. I mean, even Echoes of Wisdom, that was one of the biggest games for Nintendo last year. That has hiccups all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
So this isn't Sorry, go on.
Depending on the title, I actually switch between performance and quality. If I'm playing a game like, let's say, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, those kind of Souls-like games, I obviously am going to keep the game in performance mode. I need it to go run as fast as possible. But other games, even Final Fantasy, which runs way better in Rebirth, I'm talking about, runs way better in performance mode, I'd switch, because anytime I get to a beautiful vista or a certain area where I'm like, oh man, like I have to see this in the Fidelity mode. Zelda's one of those games where I feel like the combat is not super skill demanding like a Souls game. Not that it doesn't need skill. It can be challenging. Some of those Lionels are super hard in the modern Zeldas, but I could see myself playing a bulk of a beautiful 4K DLSS ray tracing Zelda game in that fidelity mode, as opposed to the performance, just to really take in that kind of experience for the first time with those visuals.
Wait for the Switch 2 emulation, then you get everything.
There you go. That's an option too.
Yeah,
sure,
you know,
your own game. We don't
thinking
have piracy.
Thinking about what you said there, Gamebird, the interesting thing about Nintendo and like Retro Studios, for example, when they make first party games, they don't really push for the best. Like even Retro Studios doesn't necessarily have to push for the best tech. What they do is they find innovative ways to make things look beautiful without using
absolutely
amazing tech. Like if you look at Metroid Prime Remastered, they're using a bunch of like cube maps and like actual art assets to make reflections appear to be reflections when they're just art drawn. You can actually, if you examine some of the puddles and some of the Chozo ruins there, they're actually just art assets drawn on the texture, and it looks like reflections, but they're actually not reflections. So like that kind of stuff is really cool, and that's actually something I really like that they do, because it's very innovative and creative, and visually it looks stunning. And you could tell a layman basically that's ray tracing. They'll believe you because they don't know any better. So like that's the whole thing. Like when you see these sites like Digital Foundry, and nothing against Digital Foundry, but they will try to push their own narrative in their videos, telling you what looks good and what looks bad, when actually it's up to you what looks good and what looks bad to your own eyes. They'll say this looks much worse because it's not running ray tracing, but like a lot of times these games look great just from using regular screen space reflections. So just be careful with, like, you know, when you guys in the chat, when you see these people telling you what looks good and what doesn't look good, trust your own eyes.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, the same thing that happens with resolution too. There are legitimately people that can't tell the difference from 1080p to 4K. They just their eyes can't discern the difference, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like everyone, like just because other people can, it doesn't make them better than you. It's just we all see colors a little bit different. We all see just in general the world a little bit different, and that includes video games. And beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Like the only thing for Nintendo. And this is just something it's not going to happen because it hasn't happened now, and I just don't think they're going to do it. But I would like to see Nintendo enter the world of anti-aliasing finally. It would be, they're just not going to do it because, you know, more power to make our games look better. That's fine, but like the Jaggies, it would be nice if we could just get. There's no reason you could have been using it this whole time.
I'm trying to think, didn't they use some on some Wii U games, or no? Maybe they didn't.
No, I don't think so. No, they're. I don't know why they're allergic to anti-aliasing. Guys has been in all these consoles for, you know, a decade
forever
at this point.
Yeah.
So like Switch was at that level of console. It could have used anti-aliasing. There were third-party games that did it.
Yeah.
But Nintendo, I don't know. They're just allergic to it because maybe they just think the cost of performance versus what they want to do isn't worth it.
But here's the thing: you play PC games, right? So if you notice when you turn on DLSS in PC games, guess what option does not appear? Guess what option is grayed out?
Anti-aliasing.
Anti-aliasing.
Yeah. Man, maybe that thing. Nintendo waited
they
for
don't have to use it.
Nintendo waited for AI tech to get there, so they were right the whole time. Anti-aliasing was a waste of time, everyone.
It literally is, because DLSS and DLAA, as in the chat there, it is its own form of anti-aliasing automatically.
So I think
it solves a problem.
Yeah, Nintendo, I think, is at this point where, for starters, guys, if DLSS is usable in handle, like it's just on by default or whatever, and in dodge mode, this is one of these features that, like, we're talking about it right now. Like, this is like the tech behind the scenes, because Nintendo's not going to talk about this. They don't ever talk about tech. And they're definitely not, just like they didn't talk about how they used FSR in a couple Switch games. Like, they didn't talk about that. We just found that out as fans through data mining and realizing, hey, we're seeing some effects here that seem similar to FSR. Oh, look at that in the code. They're using FSR. So like, this is stuff that we're talking about. Nintendo's never going to give us the details on. It's going to take tech breakdowns. It's going to take developers putting things out there, things leaking out of the dev portal for us to get all the full details. But it's one of these things where this is the first system to come out ever, like not even PCs or anything, where pretty much every game is going to be using this. Like every new game that releases will be using it, at least in docked mode, if not also in handheld. And most consumers are going to be blissfully unaware what the hell is going on and why the games suddenly seem to look pretty good when they look at it compared to like other systems out there, even though, no, it's not on par. It's not about being on par. It's just about being good enough that people don't care.
Yep.
And everyone's going to wonder, how the hell are they doing this? Why the hell does this stuff look so much better than like on a Steam Deck in comparison? It's like, Nintendo is not going to tell you. You just enjoy it. It's magic. Hence the magic.
Well, it's just like GameCube back in the day. I thought that was magic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
When the GameCube first came out with Rogue Squadron 2 as a launch game, I thought I was watching the movie. I was like, this is insane. I'm playing the movie.
The
It looks
ultimate
just
tech
as good as the movie.
demonstration.
I'm still like just blown away because like DLSS isn't new, and I know like 4.0 is out, and if any of that trickles down, we have no idea. But what's interesting to me is just even on PC, not every PC game supports DLSS. It just doesn't, because it doesn't need to. There's FSR technology, or they just don't want to support it at all. They want it just to be raw processing, native everything. Okay, fine. Or it's an indie game that they just don't bother.
And they have Intel upscaling too.
Intel's got their own stuff too. So what's interesting is like this is the first time a system has this across the board. Because guess what, guys? PlayStation 5 doesn't even have it on the base PS5. It's on the Pro only. And it's not even this. It's a different type. Xbox,
and they're having issues with that too. That looks pretty bad.
Yeah, it doesn't look stuff. Yeah, it doesn't look very good. Which again, they're using a custom version of FSR, whereas DLSS has always been ahead of what FSR is doing because it uses dedicated hardware cores for it, not software based. And by the way, guys, the crazy thing is there is a possibility, and if you look at some of those Nintendo patents, they might use software based as well. They might use both for different things in different games. Like they could actually do that. And only Nintendo's hardware can, because only Nintendo's hardware can use DLSS compared to the competition right now, besides on PC. And if we ever get some handheld PCs that eventually use NVIDIA tech, which I know that's probably NVIDIA's big play with Nintendo, is they're hoping, hey, when people see how much the Switch 2 is kicking ass, we're going to be the ones talking the tech at all the shows. We're going to be the ones telling people, hey, that's our technology doing that. Maybe use our stuff in those handheld PCs.
The Switch 2 is going to be the most developer-friendly console in Nintendo's history. Hands down.
Why do you think developers are so... Dude, why do we think every single insider with a source that says the developers are loving this thing? And you have like, what is it? Tom Henderson in 2023 saying, hey, whenever this thing's revealed and people can talk about it, you're going to see Switch 2 logos on almost every third-party game, because you're going to be like, really? What? Like, there's even the biggest talk right now is, will GTA 6 make it? I have no idea, but it's going to Xbox Series S. So if it's going to Series S, I don't know. Maybe.
Have you seen how bad Series S looks when it's trying to do it's upscaling lately? It looks not really bad. So like, I actually think Switch 2 games are going to look better than a lot of Series S ports because of the upscaling.
I think people don't understand how easier it is for developers to use in a portable form, especially because we've seen the handheld PCs for a while and people are really happy with them and they're doing really well. I'm like, that's good. You haven't seen what NVIDIA can do in this space when they have an up-to-date system, and that's what Switch 2 is.
It blows my mind, man. Seriously, like I did so many tests, like in comparison, just in my own time, doing like ultra performance mode on DLSS from 1080p. Even that looks way better than anything FSR is doing. And that's when like a 540p. No, that's like a 360p rendering resolution from 1080p on the ultra performance mode, and even that looks pretty darn good considering.
Yeah. If you do what was it? I saw, I've done some tests like 540p to even 1440. I was like, dude, this isn't actually that bad. What?
Right.
What? That's 540p to 1440. Okay, yeah, at 4K it wasn't great, but 1440, I'm like, wait a second, let me load this native 1440. You know what?
Right.
It's not that big of a difference.
And you know what the funny thing is too is that people don't realize this as well. DLSS actually, if you do DLSS quality mode, like say say some games will actually get to that level on Switch 2, that actually can look better than native, because what it's actually doing is it's actually correcting some mistakes of the native resolution as well with AI. Because like a 1440p image or a 4K image is still going to have jaggies and like image issues with like certain things in the graphics that they can actually fix with DLSS. So like it's amazing that the technology and the new model they have with it, the transformer model is a literal game changer for PC. So for Switch 2, it's even better. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
But my big thing, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, back when I was a guest, before I was
Back when you were a
co-host,
baby.
back when I was a baby, before I was co-host of the greatest Nintendo podcast in at least 5 countries. I just want to mention that we have the statistics to back it up. So anyways,
Really?
don't act like you don't know, Nate.
I've
You've seen the studies.
I haven't looked at the by country numbers, but maybe.
I mean,
But my big thing is that I don't care that much about power and graphics. It's never been at the priority anytime there's a new console launch. And I don't know if Nintendo necessarily had the foresight back when they made the Wii that game development was going to be so expensive, and AAA games, hundreds of millions of dollars, and studios are going to be shutting down if they don't meet certain sales milestones. But it's worked out really well for Nintendo, not having these insane $500-600 million projects that are taking 5-6 years to develop, with huge droughts. But that being said, all I've wanted with my hopes for power with Switch 2 is to have a console that's powerful enough to run third-party games without being packaged with an apology. Now, I think it's amazing we were able to get Hogwarts Legacy and The Witcher 3 and Doom even on the Switch. Really cool. It's amazing how well and how good those actually look. But, if you have the option, why wouldn't you go for, other than the portability factor, why wouldn't you go for it on a PlayStation or an Xbox or on PC? Because, those games, they lose a lot of the texture quality, or the frame rate's a lot worse. So I've wanted Switch 2 to be just powerful enough to have those third-party experiences where the developers aren't saying, we just can't make it run good, or it's the performance isn't going to be there to make it worth it for people to want to buy. I want it good enough to run third-party games day and date, and it doesn't have to be the best looking version, but I think it should look as good, like was mentioned earlier, as good as the Series S would be fantastic. Fantastic. Even as good as PS4 Pro, or sorry, PS4 Pro, because when I think of the later years of the PlayStation 4, games like Ghost of Tsushima, games like God of War, which was that, cross-gen release, God of War Ragnarok, those PS4 games are stunning. Switch 2 can do that. So I fully expect to be floored by what I'm getting with mainline Nintendo games. And if it's anywhere near as good as PS4 Pro or Series S, I'm probably going to choose Switch 2 as my third party choice, considering as the hybrid functionality. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, it's like I said, it just has to look good enough. It doesn't need to be like, you're always going to have people that are going to go, I got to have the PS5 Pro. I got to have the super high end PC. I got to have the best of the best. That's always going to be a thing for some. But that, if you think about it, that's a really niche part of the market that actually buys into that. That's not a majority of consumers. Majority of consumers are just on your base system. So I think it has to be good enough that the extra bells and whistles aren't that noticeable, which is, I mean, if you look at PS5, that's what happened with a lot of the games are on PS5 and on PS4, and then people comparing side by side, and yeah, the PS5 version's better, but it's not at a point that most people actually gave a shit. So it's gotta be that kind of thing where it's just good enough. It can't be like with Hogwarts Legacy. Yeah, okay, it's lower frame rate, lower resolution, all that, but it also added zone loading, which literally exists in no other version of the game. And they had to do that because they couldn't get it to run on the memory in a full open world without zone loading, which is understandable. The fact that Zelda can do it is like, I don't know, Nintendo's wizards with their own hardware. It is what it is.
Mhm.
But like, it's understandable why Hogwarts Legacy, and with what it's doing, yeah, it had to add zone loading. So it can't have a sacrifice like that. And then if it is a 30 FPS, because I'm sure there'll be plenty of AAA third-party games that aren't like the shooters and multiplayer that are going to be like, hey, we're single player, 30 is good enough. Let's push max visuals. Then lock that 30. No dips
Yeah.
anymore. I don't want to see 15 FPS when I don't need to. Make the sacrifices you need to, make that shit locked. And most people are fine in single player experiences with locked 30 outside of games maybe like Elden Ring that are like really difficult and a bit more
Right.
tricky with your reactions. Yeah, you want. I'm not saying 60 is not better in all situations. It is. 60 is amazing. Better than 60 is amazing. But most consumers locked 30 with pretty damn good looking visuals that look comparable enough, they'll be happy.
Yep.
Yeah, the biggest thing about Switch 2 is it's going to have the graphics are not going to be distracting. So no more Vaseline filter. Like even when they're rendering at a low resolution, upscaling, it's still going to look clean because that's the magic of DLSS. Even if it's rendering at 540p, the image output is going to look clean on your screen. You may have a little bit of artifacts here and there on the actual graphics from the rendering so low of a resolution, but the actual image quality is not going to have that Vaseline, like smeared look like the Switch had. On top of that, you had extreme compromises in graphics, missing having the graphics load right in front of your face, like in Sonic Frontiers. Like the game was like trying to render it in front of you as you're running through the level. Like that kind of stuff is going to be that's done. There's no more of that stuff on Switch 2.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it specifically. It was other than the performance, it's that Vaseline look that you see on so many of those games where it just kind of looks like your screen is just smudged over. Everything's a little bit blurry, a little bit washed out. Colors aren't vibrant. Textures are blurred into each other.
Yeah, and when you think about it, it's actually a disservice to the artists who created the games. Like some of even Nintendo's own first party games, because they have to render the games at such a low resolution. You're missing a lot of the detail that the art actually has when they created the game. So even Switch 1 backwards compatibility games that are running in high resolutions on Switch 2, those will benefit from the art. Will you actually be able to see more of the art that they created? It's all good.
Absolutely.
Looks like they're having a meeting.
Oh, geez.
It's my performance review.
Yeah.
You're fired.
We multitask around here. We got business trips coming up, and like we're trying to get things booked up. That
likely story, pal.
Dash, you got any thoughts here or any additional questions?
No, I'm just excited. Gamebird, you asked a lot of good questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Gamebird, you could ask. We need that layman questions, man.
That's a great question in the chat from Wilberforce Wooster. Can DLSS get rid of Turok fog on NSO?
I saw that.
Yes, it can.
I love it.
No.
That's everything.
That's part of the fun with that game. You gotta have the fogs. You get scared of the dinosaurs that pop out at you.
Yeah, it's artistic expression.